Good evening and welcome to the Legal Roundtable. I'm Shaniqua Gray. Tonight on the Legal Roundtable, we're bringing you updates from the 2012 regular legislative session that just recently ended here in Louisiana. We've got lawmakers in the House tonight who will be talking about new laws as well as changes to existing laws affecting you that you'll want to know about. So join us in just a moment for the Legal Roundtable Legislative Updates Edition. Welcome back to the Legal Roundtable. Tonight we're discussing updates from the 2012 regular legislative session that just recently ended here in Baton Rouge. And helping us to highlight some of the legislation from this section are Representative Regina Ashford Barrow of District 29, which includes parts of East and West Baton Rouge Parish. Committee memberships include Health and Welfare, Municipal, Parochial, and Cultural Affairs, Ways and Means, House Executive Committee, Vice Chair, Special Committee on Military and Veterans Affairs, Vice Chair, Legislative Bureau, Joint Legislative Committee on Capital Outlay, and she's been a member of the Louisiana Legislature since 2005. We also have Senator Rick Ward III of District 17, which encompasses most of St. Helena, East and West Feliciana, Point Capee, East and West Baton Rouge, Iberville, Assumption, and St. Martin parishes. He's a member of the Judiciary A Committee, Insurance Committee, and is Vice Chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. Welcome both of you to the Legal Roundtable.
Good evening.
Senator Ward, Governor Jindal has just he described this legislative session as the most successful and significant session since he's been governor. And I would think that that is at least partially due to the significant education reform. And I would think that at the top of the list would be the school voucher program, also called the scholarships. And I would think that this is a very significant change to public education in Louisiana. Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
There's, it was one of the more interesting topics we had to deal with throughout the session. It wasn't an easy one to deal with. I think change can be a difficult thing, but it's something that went through, and my hope is that it can really benefit a lot of students in areas that need it.
Now, Representative Barrow, could you tell us some more about what this will actually entail?
Well, this entails allowing students who are deemed as failing schools, schools classified in a C, D, or F, in terms of the grade that the school has received, giving the students an opportunity, or their parents rather, to put them in another school that may be deemed more effective school, or a school that have a higher grade. Being it could be a private school, or it could be a parochial school that the child can actually attend, and they can get this voucher from the state and actually put their child in that school. But there is a selection process. There's a lottery process that the child has to go through. There's also an application process that has to be filled out by the end of this month, I think by June 29th, if an individual is interested in participating in the program. So it's not actually automatic. There are some steps that has to be followed before a child can actually be a participant in one of those programs.
Okay, and if a person would like to find out more information about how they can actually apply for one of these vouchers, do you have any information on how they can apply?
Yes, I do. I have the number from the from the State Department office, which is 1-877-453-2721. And just in case individuals cannot get through to that number, I'm going to give my number, which is 359-9400, and I'd be glad to put them in contact with the proper person.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have a lot that we're covering tonight dealing with this very, very significant legislative session. So I'm going to move on through. And while we're talking about the issue of schools, Senator Ward, let's talk a little bit about this new anti-bullying law that has been passed, because I know that this is a very serious issue, and this is designed to kind of address some of those bullying issues in our Louisiana schools, right?
Absolutely. Approaching this session, it was brought to my attention just some really terrible situations that have taken place across the state, and I felt that it was a good time for us to address that, and I really feel that everyone worked together to try and do that this session. It's amazing what kids may have to go through on a daily basis, and what we wanted to do was set some guidelines in place, not only for those children, but for the teachers, the principals, the parents, everyone involved, for them to really know what needs to be done if something like this is happening. If they see it happen, whether it be their child or somebody else's, it gives them the opportunity and the guidelines to follow to try and see that something is done about it.
Now, it seems like there has been a lot of recent attention placed on this issue of bullying. I mean, is this something that you think is becoming more prevalent in our schools, or is it just becoming more noticeable because of certain high-profile cases, such as in Louisiana, this recent Tessa Middlebrook suicide?
No, I think it's something that's becoming more prevalent. I think what children have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, the harsh words that they have to deal with for whatever the reason may be. I'm not sure what the cause of it is or what the root of it is, but I definitely feel like it's becoming worse, and if this situation isn't addressed, that we could face more issues down the road.
Well, I'm glad that we have something in place, because that is certainly some very serious consequences that occurred as a result of that bullying incident, and I'm glad that we have something to address it. Now, Representative Barrow, while we're still on the issue of schools and education, we have a new law that is requiring parent-teacher conferences between the parent and the teacher, right?
Yes, we do. And I think this is a great piece of legislation in terms of having the parental involvement, making sure that parents are engaged and involved in the education of their student. There are some, caveats to it, or some exceptions. If the child is deemed a good academic student with no behavior problems, then there's an exception, whereas the parent may not be required to come. But I believe that this, oftentimes, I know as a parent, and I've watched this and witnessed this and have been a participant of this. When your child starts off in school early on, you attend everything, but the older they get, the less likely you are to attend. So this requires all the way up through 12th grade that you have at least that one meeting with that teacher, and I think that's a good requirement.
I think it's a great requirement as well, because it seems like that statute certainly recognizes the importance of parental involvement in the educational success of their child.
Yes.
And so let's talk a little bit about some of the new crimes, Senator Ward. There is a ban on the sale of cats and dogs. What do you think about that?
I think what that was geared towards was to try and hold off on some of the, I guess would be called puppy mills, where these people are constantly breeding these animals and then going on the side of the road and selling them, and maybe weeks later that animal, for whatever reason, is left on the side of the road by the person that purchased it, and maybe didn't get what they want. So it's really to cut down on some of the stray animals and some of the puppy mills, if you want to call it that. That's what that legislation was set out to address.
And this is in public places like highways, roadside, in public parks, public pools, and things like that. Okay. Exactly.
And there are some exceptions to it as well. I think some nonprofits and things like that will be allowed, but there'll be some criteria you have to meet before you can just go park on the side of the road and sell.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Well, we need to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue on with a little bit more of the legislation from the 2012 legislative session. We'll be back in just a moment, so stay with us for more from the Legal Roundtable on legislative updates from the 2012 session.
If you're a lawyer and you would like to be a guest on the Legal Roundtable TV show, call Shaniqua Gray at 225-772-1819 or email to the Legal Roundtable at herzog.com.
Welcome back to the Legal Roundtable. In this edition, we're talking about updates from the 2012 regular legislative session that just recently ended here in Louisiana. And our guests this evening are Representative Regina Barrow and also Senator Rick Ward. And they're talking about some of this legislation, and there was quite a bit of significant legislation from this session. And when we left off, we were talking about new crimes. And Representative Barrow, another new crime is female genital mutilation. And I know
Yes.
that this has been an issue in some other countries, but I wasn't aware that this was a significant issue in the United States and Louisiana.
You're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, when I first saw the legislation, I went to the author and asked her, what was this and, why was she doing it? And she shared with me that there had been an increase of this actually taking place in Louisiana, that there had been young ladies who had been rushed to the hospital because of that mutilation and because of the excess bleeding. And, they've had to have, surgery because this was actually taking place. And this is something that happens in customs with many foreign countries. And so now it's actually being implemented here a lot in Louisiana.
So we really have some people from other countries kind of bringing their practice and customs here to the
Yes.
United States and doing it here.
Yes.
Well, that's good that that is something that is going to be prevented, because it almost seems like torture from our perspective in the United States. Is just not something that we're accustomed to.
You're absolutely correct, and it's quite graphic. She actually kind of went through the scenario with me, and I was pretty much in shock just to even hear that young ladies, as early as maybe 12,
Right.
actually experiencing this.
Wow, that is very interesting. Now, Senator Ward, I would like to talk with you about a couple of new laws that we have in place affecting the Code of Criminal Procedure. And I think these are certainly significant because, as you know, Louisiana has always been a state where you knew that life meant your entire natural life. And we have some significant legislation in place now that will allow certain people to come out of jail, out of prison, even though they're serving life sentences, and that even gives a judge an ability to be able to sentence people under what is in the criminal code. So could you tell us a little bit about some of these provisions that we have?
Yeah, I think those were very significant and something that with the population in the prisons the way they are, we knew that, or I guess the author felt like it needed to be addressed. And the first thing I'd like to talk about would be the part where in Louisiana life means life. With the legislation, one of the things as far as life meaning life, if it's a crime of violence or if it's a sex offense, the time will still be the time.
That's significant.
And so that will not change. It'll be on maybe some type of non-violent offense where the person, has spent many years and they've gone through multiple programs and have done all the things to rehabilitate their life, and this may give them an opportunity further down the road to be able to come out of prison and I guess have a second chance.
I think that's what people definitely want to know, that this is not going to be serious violent offenders who are going to be out, but it's certain non-violent offenders.
Absolutely.
And also the same applies for the situation where a judge, if they agree with the prosecution and the defense, they can sentence someone to under what is in the criminal code, right?
Right. And I think what happens in that situation is there are times where technically the crime that the person committed may fit all the criteria for something, but maybe didn't rise to the level that the judge or maybe any of the parties involved with felt that the sentence would carry. So this gives the opportunity for the defendant as well as the district attorney to get together with the judge and resolve the situation in a manner where this person may not be put in prison for some overburdensome amount of time.
Right, and that sounds like it's reasonable, especially for non-violent offenders. So
Right.
our audience can be sure that this would not apply to certain sex offenders and violent offenders, but for some other non-violent crimes, there is a possibility that they could be eligible for parole or suspension of sentence. And also, we have that provision in there where we're changing the way good time is computed as well. They're getting 1.5 days for each day served.
Right.
And so it seems like these are provisions that are really designed to sort of maybe help to get some of our high prison population down, especially as it relates to these non-violent offenders. Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
Okay, and now also Representative Barrow, we have a crime in place regarding failure to report a missing or deceased child. Now this looks like it's something that was possibly inspired by this Casey Anthony situation that we all know so much about in Florida.
And it was. As a matter of fact, I think probably a week or so after that happened, one of my colleagues filed that legislation that says that, as soon as you are made aware of that a child is missing, then you have to report it immediately. And if not, it's going to carry some sentencing time.
And I think that is very important, because I think, as we all know, the quicker a child is reported missing or deceased, that's going to assist not only in finding a child who might be missing, but if a child is deceased, they can get in and investigate the case and find out evidence that they could possibly at some point use to prosecute whoever this person is. So that's going to be certainly important. And kind of along the same lines, we have some new provisions in place regarding reporting of sexual abuse. And when I read these provisions, I immediately thought about what's going on at Penn State with Coach Paterno and all of those people, and Sandusky and all of those individuals. We have something in place now to address that type of situation, don't we?
Yes, we do. And that also, I think, was inspired somewhat according to that case as well. Certainly, a lot of individuals who sometimes interact with children or have the, they see certain things, they may not actually go out and respond or may do what is proper. Well, now this is now law that if you are aware of some type of abuse, that you have to report that. And if you don't report it, then you can be held liable just as well as the person who actually commit the crime.
Right, and what I like about this, we got everything in place in this statute, because not only did we make coaches mandatory reporters, which was important because they really do interact with kids and with our young students and so forth, but also this provision requires that if you actually witness the sexual abuse, no matter who you are over the age of 18, you would be required to report it. And I thought that was significant, because that would have even brought in this trainer involved in that case, and would have made him liable and responsible as well as the coaches in the case.
And you would think that in those instances that people sometimes believe that it's not their responsibility to do that, but it is their responsibility, and they will be held accountable.
Okay. Well, look, we have to take another short break, and because we have to go ahead and take another minute, but we will be right back with more from the Legal Roundtable, the Legislative Updates edition. We've got a lot more to cover, so please stay with us.
If you're a lawyer and you would like to be a guest on the Legal Roundtable TV show, call Shaniqua Gray at 225-772-1819 or email to the Legal Roundtable at herzog.com.
Welcome back to the Legal Roundtable. In this edition, we're talking about legislative updates from the 2012 regular legislative session that just recently ended here in Louisiana. And in our last segment, we ended off talking about these new requirements to report abuse. And along with that, Representative Barrow, we also have some protection in place for those who actually do report that abuse, don't we?
Yes, the whistleblower protection. And that's probably, one of the other factors as to why people are a little bit more reluctant to come forward. Well, now we have the whistleblower protection law, whereas if they do report something, there's going, there will be no retaliation to that individual in their job. Because they've come forth and told what they've experienced or seen.
Okay, that's wonderful. Now, kind of along the same lines, we're talking about sexual abuse and the sexual offenders, Senator Ward, and we do have some additional limitations on their conduct and activity, right?
That's right. Okay. What's been put in place with legislation this year is a sex offender can no longer reside within 3 miles of the person who, I guess, he or she committed the offense against, and also they can't be within 300 feet of that victim at any particular time or communicate with them. And that's been an issue I've heard in the past, because in the situation where you may have neighbors and a bad situation occurs, this will make it to where it's not the victim that has to remove themselves from the situation, but maybe the perpetrator of the crime.
And I also understand that many of these sexual offenders, they had a significant issue with not being allowed to use Facebook, which is another limitation that had been placed on them after this session, right?
Right, and they will no longer in Louisiana be able to do that. And the reason for that, seems to be a perfect avenue for them to make contact with more victims. And so we wanted to head that off and put a stop to that, and let them know that if they do that, there'll be consequences.
And that's wonderful, because we know how many people are using these, and it's not just Facebook, obviously it is social networking sites in general, but we know that's one of the most commonly used ones, Facebook and Twitter, and everybody's on it of all ages. So it just seems like it's going to be so important that we limit that access, because they have that private access that's going on there. And now let's move on to some of the health and welfare issues, because I understand that in this section, Representative Barrow, there was some additional limitations, I would call it, placed on the ability to get abortions in Louisiana. Could you tell us about these new laws?
Well, one of the laws would require that before a woman actually has an abortion, that she has to sign off in terms of hearing the heartbeat of the baby, and she can elect to not hear the baby heartbeat by signing a waiver, but it actually offers her the opportunity to be able to do that before actually having the abortion. And I think that is really very significant in realizing that is a life.
And also the time limitation too. It's I think 24 hours now in between that given that opportunity.
That's right. You have to wait 24 hours.
Okay. And also there's this provision regarding this Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, I think at 20 weeks, when a child is capable of feeling pain. Okay.
Right.
And so at that point, that's when no more abortions
can occur.
Okay.
Yes.
And also we have this provision regarding they have to be performed by licensed physicians. That's something I would have thought Senator Ward would have already been in place, but obviously it wasn't.
Yeah, believe it or not, I was very surprised when I found out that it wasn't, and that was the reason I decided to author that bill. There's been situations, I don't know if there's been any one in particular that's been of note here in Louisiana, but in other states for sure, where you had office managers actually performing the procedure.
Wow.
And it's a surgery, it's something is being removed from the woman, so that there should be a physician that is the one doing that if it's going to be done.
I would agree that that it definitely needs to be a physician, because it is surgery. We know that all surgeries are serious and there can always be complications. And just in the same context of health and welfare, Senator Ward, that we have some new legislation regarding autism, which is another condition that seems to be growing and becoming more and more commonly diagnosed amongst our children. So what is that legislation all about?
Well, that increased the time frame for insurance. I believe it brings it from 17 to 21, and it'll allow. There's so many things that are involved with that. It'll give more time to let the person dealing with that issue with their parents. They can gain more assistance and really get all the help they need to succeed in life in the future.
Okay. Now, also, this legislative session, I think one very, very significant piece of legislation dealt with these changes to the state pension plan. And so, and this is significant, Senator Ward. Could you tell us about these changes that we have to the new retirement for new hires?
Well, the one major change of note would be the cash balance plan, and what that does, it changes it for new hires. So anyone starting into the state retirement system into the future will now be on a cash balance plan, which is similar to what you would get in the private sector. There will be some safeguards that provided that may not be there in the private sector,
Okay.
but there could be some benefit to it. For example, if you move on to another job later down the road, you would have the opportunity to pull that out and bring it with you. That was another interesting topic we had to deal with during session, but we got through it. So
That's wonderful. And, I'm a state employee, and I'm just happy that I came in before it. It may work
That's
out
right.
great, but I'm
That's
happy
right.
that I'm there before that. And also, this right to bear arms, and that would be a possible amendment to the Louisiana Constitution. This sounds like something that might have been inspired by this Trayvon Martin situation, where I think people were concerned about whether that was an issue regarding the right to bear arms, and people thought that that was going to be threatened. Is that where this came from?
I honestly don't know whether that brought this legislation on or not.
Okay.
I believe the goal of this legislation was to make the criteria whenever the Supreme Court, or any court for that matter, is dealing with someone's right to bear arms, in particular. I believe with concealed carries, they have to judge it now under strict scrutiny, as opposed to what it was previously. So that was the major goal, as far as I've heard, or
Right.
anyone I've ever spoken with, the author.
Right.
That was the goal of that particular
Well, that's something
legislation.
that we should see on the ballot this November as to whether we want
That's
to
right.
amend it. So hopefully people will have an opportunity, based on our discussions here, to make that decision as to whether that's something that they would like or not. So much happened during this legislative session, and I'm so thankful to you all for coming and sharing these pieces of legislation with us, and thank you for your hard work in getting this session done, and being a session that our governor can be so proud of. And thank you for coming. And thank you for watching the Legal Roundtable. If you want more information on any of the acts from the 2012 legislative session, you can always contact the legislative website directly at www.legis.la.gov. And that's all we have time for on this edition of the Legal Roundtable. Of course, you can always keep up with the Legal Roundtable at the blog at www.thelegalroundtableshow.com. Till next time, I'm Shaniqua Gray.